Yo, welcome in fellas. So my name is SweetPhil, and today right here, I'm going over what are the 5 most powerful sorceress weapons in all of Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, first off, I want to go over what criteria I'm going to use. And yes, this might differ from yours. Feel free to head down in the comments with anything you disagree with or ways you might weight the different types of criteria. But I'm going to go along with how much actual damage does it help you put out. I'm going to go with how much other stuff is on it, such as survivability, things along those lines. And I am going to include in it how hard it is to actually obtain these weapons. If, let's say, one of them takes several high runes and one doesn't take any at all, well, that's going to contribute to how great I think that particular weapon actually is. Now, kind of along the same lines, I'm also going to include like how cheap and how budget the item is. And like another one, how widely used it is. It's every single sorceress uses a particular item. I mean, it's got to be absolutely amazing, right? So that's going to be the criteria. Head down in the comments with anything you agree or disagree with. And now let's jump into the countdown. Now, first up, I'm going to go over actually a couple honorable mentions. They're ones that I say don't make the list because personally, I literally never use them. I'm particularly a player versus monster, get out there and magic find. So I will admit that really like stuff for PvP isn't necessarily going to be on a list that I make. But these 2 items that are going to be honorable mentions are Ashuda's Temper and Death's Fathom. Now, they can have definite uses, but in my particular instance, I don't use these things literally everywhere. I know for certain cold builds, Death's Fathom really does help out the damage, but I feel like from other options that are going to be on this list, you really, in my opinion, never want to go with that one. And like I said, just my opinion. I know that one's going to be controversial. Hit down in the comments. And then the other one that's honorable mention, the Ashuda's Temper. It's one that I just generally don't use on literally any builds. I know it has the skills on it. It's got the plus to those particular 2 damage types. But in every instance that I ever think like, oh, maybe I would want to use this, there's definitely other items that are easier to find, easier to obtain. And I would just much rather use, they have way more stuff on them to help you out. Now, these are in no particular order, but number 5, the first one on this list, I'm actually going with the Spirit Sword. Yeah, it's one of the most powerfulest items in the entire game. Spirit is, for the rune cost, so incredibly OP. Honestly, if they thought about nerfing anything on this game, the Spirit Shield, the Spirit Sword might be one of the ones they decide to nerf because it's just so overpowered for just Kalthal, Ort, and Amrune. Now, I know it's not crazy endgame, so this is, once again, I guess everything I say, people I know are going to disagree with at some point, but every single, not just sorceress, but caster in the entire game makes this Spirit Sword, so it has to be absolutely amazing, right? So with all the skills and FCR and everything else on this sword, and since every single sorceress will use this item, that's why I'm putting this one on the list of one of the best sorceress weapons. Next, I'm coming at you with actually the self-wielding Infinity. Now, this isn't used on a ton of sorceresses, but the actual lightning skill tree has several different lightning builds that are all viable, including Nova, which could be considered one of the top 5 most powerful and best builds in the entire game. So I do give it a few extra points, I guess you could say, since Nova being so powerful, and really this was an incredibly popular build on the last ladder of Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, everybody knows that throwing that Infinity on the Mercenary, you get the Conviction Aura, which will really help out your damage. But now, with the introduction of Sunder Charms, breaking lightning immunities, now when you're self-wielding that Infinity, you can actually really take full advantage of that minus enemy lightning res, and it really helps you kill any of those monsters that were previously immune to lightning way faster. Now, there are other options that actually minus enemy lightning res, and they may or may not actually be on this list later, but this particular item, the self-wielding Infinity, has way more minus enemy lightning res than other items. So along with you self-wielding Infinity, that means you can go ahead and throw an Insight on your Act 2 Mercenary, and then when you do the Energy Shield Variety, your energy is actually your life, so you actually have incredibly fast regenerating energy, which is your life, keeping your survivability amazing. So even though it sounds a little bit weird when I first say it, actually the Infinity is one of the best sorceress weapons in the game. Now, coming up next is actually another weapon for those lightning builds for the sorceress, and that's actually the Crescent Moon. Now, personally, I would almost rate this one higher than the self-wielded Infinity, but A little bit of this just comes from it being so incredibly cheap and easy to make. All you have to do is kind of get that rune, and then you can slap it in a 3-socket crystal sword with the other easily obtained runes, and you instantly get a ton of minus enemy lightning res. Now on a sorceress, you could literally get this like day 1 of ladder easy peasy, and you know how I know that? Because that's exactly what I did last ladder. Now, much like the Infinity, this is essentially only for the lightning build, but like I said, there's several different builds on that lightning skill tree. The Nova, which is obviously amazing. You can go, lightning's been amazing for years and years and years. Actually, chain lightning is really not bad now. It works pretty good, and some people actually prefer that to regular lightning. And I even did a charged bolt sorceress build pretty recently. When I went to testing it out, I was shocked with the crazy like best endgame gear, how well it actually did. So there really are several lightning builds on the sorceress. This is a great budget option. It really is inexpensive, and that's why I threw this one on the list. Now, the next one I'm dropping on you right here is a great option for sorceresses, and actually, it's a great option for essentially every single caster in the entire game, but a million billion sorceresses use it, and that is the Heart of the Oak. Now, it is not particularly difficult to make. It does take 1 high rune, the Vex, but it's one of the easier high runes to obtain. You get a ton of skills. It's great amount of faster cast rate, a bunch of all resistance. It really is an absolutely amazing weapon for any caster, and the sorceress is no exception. Now, I would kind of rate this one higher than like the Infinity or the Crescent Moon, because really it's a great option for any of the sorceress builds, whether you're going any of the fire ones, if you're doing Fireball, if you're doing Blizzard, if you're doing Frozen Orb, if you're doing Nova, if you're doing Lightning. It really is great for literally any of the sorceress builds that there are. There is almost no downside and no negative factor to having to use this weapon either. Obviously, like I said, the Infinity and the Crescent Moon is just for those lightning skills. The Spirit is kind of more of a budget option. You're not going to use it forever, but the Heart of the Oak is really an amazing endgame option for the sorceress, and that's why I obviously had to throw this one on the list. Now, in at number 1, I did say they were in no particular order, but I'm going to be honest, this is the one that I use the most, and some of this comes because I am primarily a magic find type of player, and you're not going to be surprised. Most veterans have figured out what this item's going to be, and that is the Oculus. Now, much like Heart of the Oak, this has quite a bit of all resistance. It's got a good amount of faster cast rate. It's got 3 to sorceress skills instead of the all skills, but this one is specifically for the sorceress, and that's what we're talking about today. Now, while the faster cast rate and the all res isn't as much as the Heart of the Oak, you can make those up in some other spots. But it has one very important thing that's very near and dear to my heart that is so incredibly crucial in the type of gameplay I do. That's why I always choose the Oculus, and that is the 50% better magic find. On top of that, since it is not a rune word like most of the other items on this list, you can actually socket it, stick an Istrune in it, and get this all the way up to 80 magic find just on your weapon. Now, getting all that magic find on your weapon, that means you can sacrifice magic find in literally any other location. You don't necessarily have to have War Travelers to get magic find on your boots. You don't have to have some armor that has magic find. You don't have to have some helmet that has magic find if you don't want to, because you have 80 of it already on your weapon. Can't quite remember if I mentioned this already, but this is my most widely and most often used item on the sorceress for all of these reasons. So even though, like I said, not in an exact order, 1 to 5, best to worst, this is what I would put at number 1. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe up if you haven't done so already. If you're new to the channel, you don't want to miss the future Diablo 2 Resurrected videos. And remember, any little disagreements, respectfully put them down in the comments, anywhere you agree or disagree. Peace out, fellas, and keep slaying.